I was one of 5 children. We lived in a two-family home that we rented the second floor. I was literally 20 feet from the L where the trains went. So in my living room where my brother and I slept on a pull-out couch, you could actually see the trains go past our window and the light from the train come into our window. It was very patriotic. I would go into bars in the afternoons with a shoe shine box and I would shine shoes. It was things like that that they don't get. I mean, you really did that? You went into a bar and shined people's shoes? I said, yeah, got me some money. So that's pretty much the environment. After I finished high school, I joined the Navy. I joined the Navy because I felt obligated as a patriot to give 4 years of my life to my country. And that 4 years turned into 23. I really enjoyed it. I was involved in the Submarine Force, spent a couple of tours in Washington, D.C., and then I was commissioned an officer through a limited duty officer program that the Navy has. It's a direct commission.
Hey, let's welcome Bill Ashton, who served 23 years in the Navy's Submarine Force, led programs for homeless veterans at the VA, and helped veterans build farming careers at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Good to see you, sir. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Danny. I appreciate it. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. Well, I usually start with the story of my guests, so I'll let you share your story in your own words. Whatever you want to start with, your childhood or maybe your career, just to better understand where you come from and what you did in the past.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I'll make it kind of short. I grew up in New York City. After I finished high school, I joined the Navy. I joined the Navy because I felt obligated as a patriot to give 4 years of my life to my country. And that 4 years turned into 23. I really enjoyed it. I was involved in the Submarine Force, spent a couple of tours in Washington, D.C., and then I was commissioned an officer through a limited duty officer program that the Navy has. It's a direct commission. And so I spent 10 years as an enlisted person, and I spent 13 years as an officer. And I was involved in supporting the submarine force numerous occasions during my 13 years as an officer. I also did a number of tours in Washington, D.C., and then I got into the Navy's pay and personnel program. Those are the people who take care of the personnel records and pay our sailors on active duty and reserves. I did that. In my last job in the Navy, I was the military assistant to the director of defense reform. That was an interesting tour to see how the Department of Defense was looking to reform some of the programs that they had. When I got out in 1999, I went to the western end of Pennsylvania, a small town called Sharon, Pennsylvania, sort of like the heartland of America. Flags on all the telephone poles when you went down the street. And it was just a really quaint town. And the company I worked for, believe it or not, in this small town was the manufacturer of the club, the red stick that you put on your steering wheel. So I worked for them as the director of operations for about 2.5 years. And while I was there, they owned their own advertising company. And at one point in time, 15 of the 16 employees walked out and went over to Ohio and started their own advertising company. And so my boss, where I was the director of operations, her and her brother were the president and vice president of that company. And she asked me if I would go up and put the advertising company back together. I couldn't even spell advertising. But I went up there and I figured it out. And within about, I'd say 6 months, I had the place up and running. And so after that, I thought I was going to go back to the home office, which was literally down the street. And my boss came in and said, my brother wants to really take over the advertising company. And I said, okay, I'm not part of the family here, so I guess, they're going to do that. She said, but we're not finished with you. I said, what do you mean you're not finished with me? So, we have a culinary school, and we'd like you to run the culinary school also. I said, you want me to do it as a collateral duty to the other one? Yeah. We're going to increase your salary. We're going to take care of you. I said, okay. So I was just required to go out to the school in the beginning every Friday. We didn't have classes on Friday. And I would go out on a Friday and I would review and pay the bills. and the instructors would cook lunch. So it was great. I'd go out, pay bills, and get a free lunch. The chairman of the board, their dad, came and see me one day and said, "How much time are you spending out at the school?" And I said, "Oh, sir, I'm out there once a week." He said, "I think you need to spend more time out there." So I literally started to work out of there as full time. And one of the things was it was a small school. We didn't have many students, but they were not accredited. So people they couldn't go into FAFSA and get government loans and everything like that for the school. They were either mom and dad were taking a second mortgage on their house and paying for it. One of the things that he had asked me to do was to get the school accredited. And so in the next probably 6 to 8 months, I was able to get the school accredited. And so then after that, I decided that I was going to leave Pennsylvania and come back to Washington, D.C. So I came back to Washington, D.C., and I worked for the organization that did the pay and personnel as a civilian. And then they were looking for someone to be a program manager of that organization. So I applied for that and got selected. And so I did that for about 15 years. Brought the organization from paying sailors 58% of the time correctly to 97%. Paying them on time correctly. The organization was moved from Washington, D.C. to Millington, Tennessee. I was not going to Millington, Tennessee, so I was able to be put in another position, was the Director of Security at the Naval Sea Systems Command in the Navy Yard. This was the command that had the shooting back in September 16th, where 12 employees were shot and killed. So they moved them out of that building and they renovated the building, brought them back, less the director of security. And that's when I was asked to come over there and work as the director of security. And then I did that for 2.5 years, and another opportunity came up for me to leave the Department of Navy and go over to the Department of Agriculture. And I was the military veteran agriculture liaison. I was the first permanent government employee to have that position. That position was actually put in law by the Farm Bill. So I did that for about 2.5 years, and I retired from the federal government after 21 years of service in 1999. And I moved to Ocala, Florida, which is the horse capital of the world. And no, I don't own any horses, but I sure as heck see a lot of horse ranches. So
So,
that's about 66 years of what happened with Bill Ashton.
would you do it all again, or would you, if you could go back in time, maybe to the start of your career in the Navy or later on in the federal government or in that small town in Pennsylvania, would you want to change anything if you could go back in time?
I don't think I would. I've always been in the service to others. And so my whole Navy career and the positions that I held, even when I was enlisted, I was doing service to others. And so I wouldn't change anything there. The career I took in the Navy with the submarine force, the camaraderie, the people that I met, a small unit. And so even to this day, I still stay in touch with a lot of the people that I was stationed with in 1977 on my first submarine. I also stay in touch with about 20 to 25 people I went to high school with. I hold a Zoom call about every quarter with about 10 of them, and we just reminisce about the good old days and what everyone is doing today and things like that. And then the experience when I left the government to work in the private sector, which I had absolutely no clue about. I knew nothing about point of sale and how salespeople's minds think. And so that was a great opportunity there. And then when I went back to the federal government, I wouldn't change anything. I had a great time. I enjoyed it. I woke up every day looking forward to go to work. My last 4 years was with the Department of Agriculture. I would have never thought somebody from New York City would be working in the Department of Agriculture. And I learned so much in my last 4 years with the federal government, with the Department of Agriculture, of what they actually do. I used to tell people when I was giving briefings that, one of these days when the secretary hears my brief, he's probably going to fire me. because I used to say the Department of Agriculture is not all about farming. Yes, it's a big portion of it, but they also give loans for homes. They get into telehealth, broadband. I mean, it just went on and on. I just couldn't believe all the things that the Department of Agriculture actually did. It's one of the largest federal agencies that we have. Would I change anything? No.
And did you say that you're still involved with the veterans and helping the veteran community?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a passion to take care of veterans. And why do I have that? I've walked the walk and I've talked the talk. I've been involved with the Veterans Administration, as you mentioned early on in the opening up, that I was an ex officio to the Committee on Homelessness at the VA. And I was on that as an ex officio because of my position at the Department of Agriculture. So I got to learn about homelessness. And, you always in big cities, you see veterans out there with a cardboard sign, former veteran, would do work or needs food or collect and everything like that. And it really bothered me. And so I started to dig into different things in the VA. How do people get involved in it? How does somebody who's leaving the service today, how do they know what to do? I mean, the VA is big. And so how do they know this? So, as I learned it, I started to say to myself, I know an awful lot about this stuff. So I've actually put together a PowerPoint brief that I offer to people for free, and it covers VA benefits. Now, when people are leaving the service, they have to go through what's called a transition assistance program. It's about a week long, and you're fed with a fire hose. Department of Defense, Department of Veterans Affairs, and the Department of Labor. They all come in 1 week, and they give you briefs, and they help you with certain things, resume writing, interviews, all in 1 week. Well, when people leave there, their head is spinning, and they honestly can't remember everything. And so what I offer people is, either when they're just about ready to get out or veterans. I mean, I'm in a community that's 55 and older, and I give the briefs to people here because they didn't know. My tagline is veterans don't know what veterans don't know, and it's not their fault. And, I see it all the time when I mention to veterans about, in the VA healthcare. The VA healthcare is one of the largest healthcares in the world. And they say, well, I'm getting disability. And then I say, are you in the VA healthcare? And they say, I told you I got disability. I said, you don't understand. It's almost like any federal agency that has other sub-agencies. They don't talk to each other. So you're getting your disability from the Veterans Benefits Administration that doesn't talk to the Veterans Health Administration. So you literally have to go over to the Veterans Health. And, I use it. So when I say I walk the walk, I use it. I know how it is. And so I'm more than happy to let people know about it. I've given the brief to some very senior people in the military that I don't even know, just by word of mouth, in my network. Some people contact them and say, hey, it's probably worth just to hear his brief. It takes about an hour. And that's what I do. And so I continue to help veterans with their benefits that they have coming out of the service.
Yeah, that's amazing. Really want to ask you about growing up in the New York City and your experience, growing up there probably back in the 60s. Because I imagine, the old days to be like you have the mob and mafia, and I don't know how like big it was back in the day, but just curious to ask you about your, you growing up there and what you remember
Sure.
from that period of life.
I wasn't involved in any kind of mafia, just so you know that.
No, that's good. That's good.
I went to school. Well, I grew up in a neighborhood that was predominantly Irish Italian. I was one of 5 children. We lived in a 2-family home that we rented the second floor. I was literally 20 feet from the L where the trains went. So in my living room where my brother and I slept on a pull-out couch, you could actually see the trains go past our window and the light from the train come into our window. It was a very patriotic neighborhood. And so I went to school locally there, and then I went to high school in Brooklyn for 2 years, and then that high school moved to Queens, and so I finished my last 2 years in Queens. I have twin boys, and when I talk to them sometimes to tell them the things that I did when I was growing up, and they kind of look at me like, "You got to be kidding me." So, like, I had a paper route. I would go into bars in the afternoons with a shoe shine box, and I would shine shoes. It was things like that that they don't get. I mean, you really did that? You went into a bar and shined people's shoes? I said, yeah, got me some money. So that's pretty much, the environment when I was.
And now you live in Florida. Do you prefer the the climate and just the lifestyle difference living down south in Florida compared to the big city like New York?
Yeah, well, I spent a lot of time in Washington D.C. also. So I've never been back permanently to New York. I left there when I was 17, so it was 50 years ago. When I was retiring from the military, my family up in New York had asked me, "Are you going to come back here?" And I said, "I really don't have any desire to come back there. Just things change, had a family. And so living in Florida compared to some of the other places I've lived in, there's this white stuff that comes out of the sky and covers your sidewalks and everything like that. I don't miss that at all. I don't miss having to shovel things like that. Although it gets hot here, but I did actually 2 tours in the military in Charleston, South Carolina, so I know what the heat is and humidity. And when people say to me, "Oh, you got to be crazy to be down there. It gets so hot." And I say, "Well, that's what they made air conditioners for." So I just stay indoors or go to the pool. And the other thing, it's more relaxing. When he's in a rush down here, the majority of the people in this community are retired. So, there's no rush to do things. And in trying to help veterans and things like that, it's on my schedule. I don't report to anybody. If I want to set up a Zoom call, if somebody reaches out to me and says, "Hey, I'd like to get you brief." Okay, I like to do them around 7 o'clock in the evening. Takes about an hour. I'm normally flexible with them, but it's on my schedule that I do those things. So yeah, I enjoy the life here.
Awesome. And do you want to share some kind of advice for young people listening to this episode, this podcast? You said that, when you were 17, you knew that you want to serve, that you wanted to give back to the country. Would you recommend the same to the to young people now, or maybe you have some other advice you want to share?
Well, as you heard, I went into the Navy right after high school and then went to college. And so what would I say to kids these days, seniors in high school, thinking about what they're going to do next? It is uh, um, a big decision. So here you are, 17 or 18 years old, and got to make a decision in life. Am I going to go to college? What am I going to do? I would say in today's environment that joining the military is a great opportunity. You don't necessarily have to make it a career, although I would tell people that it's something to consider. But joining the military, one, makes you grow up rather quickly. Two, you can learn a trade anywhere from welding to nuclear welding to being a culinary specialist. You name it, there are hundreds of different trades that you could get into in the military. The other thing is and I look back now and I say, boy, what a great decision I made. And I didn't even realize I was doing it by making the Navy a career. But I have medical coverage for my family for the rest of our lives. At least my wife and I, when your children turn 26, they kind of come off the rolls. And I didn't even think about making it a career. And to this day now, I've been retired from the military 26 years. And every month, Uncle Sam sends me a nice check. And I'm pretty happy about that. Now, in today's environment and joining the military, they have this post 9/11 GI Bill. So, listen, people go into pretty heavy debt if they just leave high school, and then if they don't have any scholarships and they don't get a lot of funding from the government, you could really ring up a bill that would be very expensive. And, you think about when you get out of college, you have a degree, you got to find a job. I've known a lot of people who went to college, got a degree in accounting, and became, mailmen. So, but they still had that loan to pay off. And so that affects, whether you're able to afford a home. One of the things about joining the military is we have the VA home loan guarantee, where you don't have to put money down when you leave the military. While you're in the military, you can use it, and you don't have to pay that. You don't have to pay the P&I insurance that most first-time homeowners have to buy, and normally the interest rate is lower. So I would tell people that, hey, give it a shot. 4 years out of your life when you're young to get um, a trade, an experience of traveling. Let me tell you, I wasn't in the Navy more than a year, and I had to leave New York and go to La Maddalena in Italy to meet my submarine. And let me tell you, for an 18-year-old person to go do that, I was really scared. So, like I said in the beginning, it makes you grow up rather quickly. So, yeah, I would highly recommend people to go into the service and take advantage of it. I would hope that they're doing it for patriotic reason, but a lot of them don't do it for that. They do it for the benefits that they get, whatever it may be. And like I said, I had no intentions of making the Navy a career when I first joined. That was not the thing to do.
And before we wrap up this episode, do you have a message to fellow veterans who are listening to this episode? I have a few friends from the Navy who love to listen to almost every episode of the podcast. So, what would you want to tell them?
Well, what I would tell them is this, depending on where they are today, like you have different generations. You have the Vietnam veterans. They don't necessarily want to take anything from the government because the way they were treated when they came back from Vietnam. Okay. Then you have the Cold War veterans, and then you get into the Desert Storm, Desert Shield, Iraq, Afghanistan. I one time heard, and I truly believe he's now the Deputy Secretary of the Veterans Administration, Dr. Paul Lawrence. He said, "You served, you deserve." There are benefits there for everyone who serves in the military. It's just not disability payments. It could be health care. It could be the post 9/11 GI Bill. It could be the home loan guarantee. And then one thing that people, when I'm giving my brief, that they don't realize is every state has their own Department of Veteran Services, state run, and they help veterans get jobs within the state wherever they decide they're going to settle when they get out of the military. And a lot of them don't even know that. And depending on if you have a disability rating, you may be able to get fishing and hunting license for free. Depending on high level, if you get 100% disability from the VA, permanent and total, you may very well be able to get exempt on paying a personal property tax on your home and your vehicle. So what I would say to people is this, and I don't know if you can post it anywhere, but my email address is veteransfirst, the number 18, gmail.com. That's veteransfirst, the number 18 at gmail.com. They contact me, I'll reach out to them. We'll set up. And like I said, it's free, and it doesn't hurt to just know what your benefits are and possibly get into VA healthcare. People leaving the military today, a lot of them have PTSD, TBI, and don't know where to turn. And I want to help them. I want them to get the help they deserve.
Yeah, I'll make sure I include the email in the description under the video. So if you're watching this on YouTube, the email that Bill just mentioned should be there. Yeah, let's wrap up this episode. Thank you, sir, for coming over, for sharing your story. Hope this was valuable for both the veterans, young people, and anyone just curious to hear your story.
Sure.
And many thanks for joining today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. And like you said in the beginning, one of the things you like to do with this is networking, and I'm a big networker. So if my network expands more because of this, that's great.
Absolutely.